I want to talk to you today about something that's happening in the produce industry, which I think is very, very positive, but I also want to position it against what else is happening in the industry. First of all, let's recognize that the consumer market has changed dramatically. We can see that we have more two-working households, more single-person households. How many people would describe the U.S. as being the household type that is most common as single-person households? If we look at all of this, we're much better informed. We have an aging population, unfortunately. And so we really have some different consumers. As a matter of fact, one of the stats is that if we look, the U.S., it's a little higher now, but it's about 28 to 29% of all households are single-person households. We also know that we have this group, the millennials, that is getting more significant in our population, and that group that we have identified for so many years as being the most important group is declining. So what has the food industry done to respond to this? I think they've done a great job. We started for years and years selling lettuce. And then we got this idea that people didn't want to have a whole head of lettuce, cut it in half and throw half away, that they didn't want the trouble of washing it, etc. So the industry came out with lettuce in a bag. Brilliant. Of course, the people out there, the retail industry, fought it. You know why? Because they said it was more expensive. Of course it's more expensive, but it's value added. And then they went a little further. And then they went and created kits that had just not the lettuce, but they had the dressing. They often had different parts, carrots and things of that nature in there. And finally they went the whole kits, just everything together. And the produce industry has moved with the changing consumer. I walked around and saw so many products like cut up beets. I love beets. The pain in the ass to cook them, to be honest with you. But this was fantastic. They were already cut up. All you had to do is throw them in the pot. We find that branded companies are involved with helping the naive shopper to do a better job. An easier job, not a less expensive job. We find more processed foods. We have apples, just walk around. You can see all the things that people have washed, they've cut up, they've put in bags, they've changed the size. They've done things to the time-starved consumer that makes it more convenient for them. Here's an entire section of a store with various types of shortcuts, all sorts of different kinds of products that are cut up, designed, and prepared to be cooked. I mean, here is the store brands, Trader Joe's, uses soups, stews, etc. In a focus group, I had a woman come up to me and say, I want to cook like Emerald. And I said, ma'am, we all want to cook like Emerald. She said, no, you don't understand. He goes on TV and he says, take a half a cup of onions and throw them in the pan. Where'd those onions come from? Ladies and gentlemen, we're letting people cook like Emerald because we are, in fact, cutting up carrots and celery and onions, and we have every combination of that. We have done exactly what consumers have asked us to do. But what hasn't changed? What hasn't changed is fresh produce doesn't use the wide range of trade and consumer promotions to get people to learn about the product and buy the product. You know what? We are still focused as an industry on commodity pricing. We still think about this product as what's the cost of lettuce and comparing this price-wise to the cost. We got to tell people. We got to let them know. I was in my ShopRite and I was walking around the produce section, and up on the shelf is a container. It had chopped up onions, celery, and garlic. Primary ingredient of virtually everything I cook. I said to the produce manager, "How's this doing?" "Not very good." I said, "Why not, do you think?" He said, "No one knows we have it." What has changed is the products have changed. The marketing has not changed. You know, it's amazing. The produce industry truly amazes me. If you look at the signage in the store, you'll see a big sign, it'll say asparagus. Who didn't know it's asparagus? Why did you need a sign to tell someone? You think people walk up and say, "Wonder what that green stalky stuff is." Wait a minute. Ah, it's asparagus. I mean, we have so many chances to communicate, and the only thing we tell them is what they actually knew. But trade promotion and in-store promotion is very, very common in the consumer products industry. If you look in terms of promotion, it's almost as much as advertising. And I found this because I wanted to know how much is spent, so we can see the allowance, trade allowances by segment. We don't even mention produce. They're not even on the chart. There are companies out there whose job it is to create and emphasize reasons to buy products other than price. We still have this commodity sense. And as I said, you know, the produce industry fought the bag salad. Because who's going to spend twice as much money on a bag of salad? They could get the whole head of lettuce for less than that. So what can you do? What are some of the things that the produce industry can do to act more like a CPG company, to act more in terms of trying to convince people to buy these processed, fresh products? Besides put it on the shelf. One, and I think it's critical, is point of purchase displays. I was talking to a friend of mine with the New York apples. And you know the problem, they have Ruby Frost, they have Snapdragon, they have all the Honey Crisp, Galas, you name it. Can anyone tell me the difference in these? Except what? The price. I said, "Jim, why don't you put a QR code on each one of these signs, and if someone can come up, they can scan it." I can't. I only have two apps. I think someone beat me once that had one app. I have no app. I don't even know it. But they tell me that you just come up and you scan it, and you can read that the Honey Crisp is this. You know, it has a sweetness of this. It's crisp. Or, you know, it compares to this. Its origin was Gala or something of that nature. Tell me about it. Tell me about it. You know, now realize if you have 10 different apples, you can't have 10 different signs with all of this stuff. It's too much. We don't need to. Technology, just in the case of apples. But we're talking about point of purchase displays. Advertising support programs. We need to have give people a reason to buy these things. We didn't need to give people reasons to buy onions, but we need to tell them about onions, celery, and peppers. In terms of trade allowances, various types of short-term allowances, sales incentives. This is the most common thing in all of the consumer products industry, is various types of sales promotions, promoting products, and of course trade shows. Trade shows we do well. Trade shows we do well. So I'd like to address three things. What are some of the more processed foods that are now in the produce section? What are some of these foods? What kind of promotional tools can be used? And what is promotion optimization? There's a whole institute, I'll talk in a minute, but the whole institute for the CPG industry that takes your scanner data and actually tells you exactly the ROI on each of your promotions. They allow you to simulate promotions. I mean, all this stuff exists. We're not asking anyone to do something that is not currently and easily available. But the most difficult thing, we're asking for the most difficult thing. You know what that is? A change of mindset. It's the change of mindset that's difficult. Now, usually the first question that anyone asks is, where are we getting the money for all this stuff? Where are we getting the money? Well, the answer is, of all pre-cut products, none had a bigger markup than onions. So all you got to do, chop it up, put it in the package, and it's about 392% more margin. If we look at kale, kale is the hot thing. Everyone loves kale. Anyone cook kale? It's a pain in the neck. It's not easy to cook. And it usually has to be washed a lot, but it has a lot of sand and dirt in it. Well, let's see, you could pay $11 a pound or $2.80 a pound for the fresh kale that's a pain in the neck to produce. That's where the money's coming from. I wouldn't ask anyone to do this if you're commodity pricing. I wouldn't ask anybody to go out and get involved in promotional program if you're selling lettuce at some commodity price where the lowest price wins, especially in, commodity auctions. Commodity auctions, you go in and you say how much for a head of iceberg lettuce, and everyone puts their price in, and that's the end of the story. That doesn't happen when you're doing the process stuff. You don't have the auctions for the commodity products. Everyone's not demanding the lowest possible price for their product. They'll negotiate. They negotiate with everything. But it's from these markups. I was talking to one person about onions, and I said, onions are interesting because in some places, you can make, you sell onions 4 different places in the store, each at a much higher price. He said, I don't sell onions. I got one place, in the produce section. I said, no, you have it in the produce section. They're really cheap. And then you have them on skewers in the meat department. So you're selling those onions for about, $9 a pound. You have them in the salad bar, and you have them in the cut up salads. And each one offers a different value, a different benefit to the consumer. And each one of those benefits have a different cash or price relationship. Here's an entire section of ready-to-use produce products. Fresh shallots. I love to cook with shallots. They're so little, it's hard to cut up. I mean, they're about, some of them are a little bigger than a garlic. But look at all this stuff. I'm not talking about some new thoughts in produce marketing. I'm not talking about breaking rules. They're here already. They're here. Now, let me talk about sales and trade promotions. For the most part, how do we promote our products? We're in a feature in a newspaper circular, and we just say it's a low price. We just say our tomatoes are, $2.50 a pound. So do you really think consumers are going to come to your grocery store because tomatoes are $2.50 a pound in your store and $2.60 a pound in another store? No, not at all. So you're giving away 10 cents right there. The second thing is people who come to that store and wanted tomatoes, they're not going to not buy tomatoes because they're $2.60 a pound. Say, I think they're $2.50 a pound someplace else. They're still going to buy them. So the trick in most cases is to differentiate your products, increase visibility, and increase the purchase rate. That's what this trade sales promotion about. It's to increase awareness and marketing acceptance by using various types of tools to get people's attention and to get people to look at these kinds of things. Now, they include a whole bunch of things. Well, we're going to talk about each one. But clearly, rebates, coupons, premiums, contests. When have you seen any of this stuff for a head of lettuce? Now, promotion optimization I talked about, and it's a little wordy, but since a lot of people ask for the presentation, I like to put this stuff in there. Promotion optimization, and I'll show you how it's done in a little bit, takes a look at what promotions you've actually run, gets the scanner data, calculates ROI, and lets you understand the impact of how each and every one of your promotions affected sales. There's generally a whole suite of different kinds of promotions. And by the way, it's the biggest companies. IBM sells this service. Who's the big one? Accenture sells this service. And then there's small companies, I don't have it here, T-Pro, that primarily works with small companies, that sells basically the same exact service. How to optimize these promotions. Now remember, at this point in the produce industry, we haven't had these kind of promotions in order to figure out how to optimize them. Not all promotions work, and that's part of this, is to figure out what works for your products. And you can see that the average sales lift increase from displays, just displays. You can see they weren't that effective in food stores, but they really did well in drugstores. Excuse me, the feature. The feature means you're putting it in the newspaper, in the circular. Anyone ever seen that recently? The only person I think reads that is Raymond Babbitt. Remember the... There's thousands of things there, thousands of prices. You know, how could they be effective? On the other hand, look at the impact of a display. Putting something out, telling people this is what you should buy. You can measure, one of the things you can measure is the timing and the frequency that you should run your promotions. timing and frequency. How often should you do this? You know, if you're selling something like paper towels, people don't necessarily make more messes and use more paper towels just because you have this promotion. They may buy more, but they're going to delay future decisions. So you can look at the effect that it had on forward buying. You can look at seasonality. You can look at pricing and post-promotion timing gaps. All of these things are critical to understanding how you should use the same exact tools that every other industry, that Hormel uses, that Kellogg uses, and all of these companies. They do this. So there's no question that the most used is called the TPR, a temporary price reduction. We see this all the time where we have different produce products at different prices. I have yet to see in any of these processed foods. I've never seen any of all those processed stuff that we looked at before here. This reminds me, the cantaloupe reminds me, I like to test retailers. So I went into this retail store, and remember, largest family size U.S. single person households, a whole cantaloupe might not be very good for them. So I went in, and the kid working in the produce section, I said, can I get a half a cantaloupe? Can you cut it in half for me? Kid said, I don't think so, sir. I said, do me a favor, go ask the manager. So he goes in, walks in to ask the manager. He didn't see that I was walking behind him. And he walks up to the manager and he says, there's some jackass out there wants to buy a half a cantaloupe. And then he sees me and he says, and this gentleman wants the other half. Yeah, this is still the most popular way of promoting our products, but it is just through temporary price reductions. I will tell you this, that in all the other categories that I've studied, temporary price reduction is about the least effective and the one we use the most. Coupons. You know, many people say, my family eats a lot of fresh food, but you can't find coupons for produce. Coupons give consumers a sense of the deal. They think they're really getting something. I've done experiments at the university, and consumers would rather see a $5 price and have a 50-cent coupon than they would a $4.50 price. It makes no sense, right? Logically, why would that? Because it's the psychology of I'm getting a deal. Man, I have this coupon, and he doesn't. I'm getting a better deal. That's what it's about. It's not necessarily about lower price. It's feeling good about getting a better deal. By the way, what about the people who didn't have a coupon? They pay the $5. You get the margin. I just want to say one thing. A lot of people complain about coupons. People love coupons. 96% of people use coupons. 85% of Americans use coupons. I mean, everyone loves coupons. We talk about technology. We know that you can get coupons through technology, but generally we print them out, and we generally take them into the store. 83% of affluent shoppers, based on in-store discounts, 77% of people do something. I don't, it's off the slide, I can't see it. But the fact of the matter is, coupons are a pain to deal with. They're a pain to budget for, but they work. They really do work. What's that? I think it's 77 of overall shoppers. Yeah, yeah. Personally, I've done loads of focus groups, and I've always asked the question, most of my work was in the mushroom industry. Most of the work I said, what would encourage you to buy more? Can you believe coupons was the very first thing? Coupons. You never see a deal, they said. You never see a deal on mushrooms. I didn't say to her, every day they're a deal. You know, if whatever the everyday price is, they don't care how low it is, it's not a deal. You know why? Because it's the everyday price. There's so many choices of how you deliver coupons. You know, you can have the things right on the shelf. You can have them in the produce section. You can have them in the newspaper. This is Catalina. You know, does everyone know how Catalina works? Right? Imagine that Catalina works that after you check out, the computer figures out what you bought and offers you coupons based on what you buy. So if you bought cat food, you might get a coupon for cat litter. If you bought Coca-Cola, you might get a coupon for Pepsi-Cola. Right? So what about if people bought some of these prepared meals that the previous speakers talked about? They obviously value convenience. They're the perfect person to send a targeted coupon for some of these intermediate foods. And keep in mind, people really want to cook. I mean, that's the thing that's difficult for people to understand is we're not cooking as much as we used to. But cooking a meal is more than providing nutrients. Having a meal together is a social experience that, you know, if you think about various important events, weddings, baptisms, what do you always have? Food. Because it's a nice social gathering. And we don't want to just have frozen meals. We don't, you know, a food preparer, usually a female, doesn't want to come to the table and say, look at what I nuked for you tonight, darling. But taking all of these processed ingredients, etc., you can take credit. You can take credit for preparing the meal. Like the woman said, I want to cook like Emerald. We could do much. Look at this signage. It's just outright plain terrible. We can do so much with signage. We can tell such a story. We can use technology like QR codes and things of that nature. We can give people recipes with we can do so much with the point of sale signs other than tell people what they already know. End caps, you know, end caps are the most valued property in the store. We know Coke loves them. We know that you know, virtually all the companies pay dearly to be on an end cap. Why do they do that? Why would you pay so much money to be at the end cap? Because you sell more food. It's not that complicated. And we find that virtually never do we see any produce on an end cap. We do see this. We do see displays, but displays are usually when the food is cheap, when they have tons of product, and you know it's at a lower price. But it's not unusual. It's not unusual to be sorry. But here's pretty bad one thing. Here's what I like. Okay, we can't afford to be in an end cap. But take a look at this. Here we have fresh pineapples in the breakfast. If you look at, for example, Public Store has something called aprons, which in one section, it has all the things you need to make the meal. We should be fighting to get into that section. It's very successful. If you want to look at something, just Google aprons from Publix, and they've really done a great job of that. Taking advantage of the fact that people really want to cook. They just want to have an easy cook. Sampling, sampling is expensive. I understand that. And sampling poorly executed probably hurts your product more than it helps it. But the fact of the matter is, why do we buy most food? I've been conducting surveys this is my 43rd year. And there's one benefit has won every time. Not health, not convenience, taste. Taste, we buy food because it tastes good. And the food that doesn't taste good, remember all the healthy, non-fat and all the stuff that came out? The box tasted a little bit better. And they all failed. So one of the things that's really valuable in this industry is sampling. And you've got to be creative and figure out how to make it less expensive. Floor signage. One of the things we discovered when doing the mushroom research, the number one reason people forgot to buy mushrooms? Excuse me, I gave you the answer. The number one reason people didn't buy mushrooms, they forgot them. We need to have reminders. The most effective thing for the mushroom industry, because people forget to buy them, was putting the signage in the shopping carts. Just in your face the whole time. Mushrooms, 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 mushrooms. What should I put on my steak? Mushrooms. And here's your shopping cart signage. Tell people. It could be so simple. Make your cooking easier and have a picture of the product that you have, that we saw that Trader Joe's had and that everyone had. We have to expect more high tech, and we have to take advantage of it. I think if we listed the extent to which companies use high tech, the produce industry has to be near the bottom of the list. And they're going to be all sorts. I'm not going to take a whole hour on high tech. So how do we do it? This is the end. First of all, there are a lot of suppliers who run an analysis right off the scanner data. There's a whole association called Trade Promotion Optimization. All the people are there. Every major company that I know, the food company, the Kellogg's, the Hormel's, the Frito-Lay, all these people are there. Who's not there? The produce industry. Just in and of itself, that ought to be evidence that something doesn't quite add up. That if everyone is doing these things and we're not, we need to have a good answer why. Call one of these companies. I just use T-Pro as an example. They'll take you through how you would do it. They'll take you through how to do it. Here's like after the event. You'll get a slide that will literally tell you this is the store, it was in beverages, and it explains exactly how effective this was, and of course they give you a baseline. There's the story right there. There's the story, Morning Glory. There's the tale, Nightingale. It's the first line from Bye Bye Birdie. Again, you can do predictive planning. You can create simulations and say, what if I only do this? What happens? And take a look at the data you get. You actually get, what the revenue is, what's the incremental revenue, what trade promotion did you run, all the way down to the ROI, and I love it. So we run this particular promotion. By the way, it was a price-only promotion, and the manufacturer loses and the retailer wins. Well, that's a common story. You can simulate these things and say, we're going to run this, we're going to run that, we're going to have coupons, we can do all this stuff, and we can actually calculate, well, we don't, You calculate like this. You push the button, and it will tell you what is your ROI and what's the retailer's IOI. Conclusion. More and more of the fresh produce industry is becoming processed. Processed in the extent we do something to it. And if they want to continue to compete, they're going to have to compete with other processed food companies. And these companies rely heavily on in-store promotions. Fresh food marketers will have to use some of the current methods on their processed food. It's not just about price. If I've ever seen an industry that is so enamored with low price, it's got to be the produce industry. You know, anybody can sell product cheap. It takes a genius to sell it at a high price. You know, we can't just focus on we can do it cheaper. And the last is trade promotion optimization is a must if marketers and retailers use more in-store promotion. Because if you take my advice and use more and you don't use the metrics in order to determine how good it is, you will be wasting money. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Stanton.
Anyone
Excellent.
can have this presentation, by the way.
We'll be happy to share them and post them to our website. So, questions for Dr. Stanton? I've got a question.
What a surprise.
So, in the last 2 to 4 years, has there been a fresh produce commodity or a category or maybe a retailer that did a promotion program that really impressed you? And why was it so impressive?
Wegmans. Wegmans tends to be their target market is a little more foodies. They want to cook a little more. They're a little higher income, and they don't have the time. And so a lot of these mixes and a lot of these cut-up things, etc., are nicely promoted within the store because they know people are using it.
Know your customer.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yep.
I was just wondering, how do you think some of the meal subscriptions like HelloFresh and Blue Apron, how they're affecting the produce CPG industry?
Well, they're almost the ultimate of what I'm saying, in the sense that they're just not giving you the little container of cut up vegetables, etc. I mean, they're giving you everything in the meal. It's also, it meets a lot of younger people's desire not to waste things. It's exactly the number of the amount of product you need for a meal. However, I thought it was interesting when Blue Apron was on Shark Tank, the shark said, "What a ridiculous idea." And my son gets Blue Apron, and he loves it. What do we got, John?
Okay, I'm gonna open you up to the other side of the business.
Yep.
The promotional tools for moving volume, because on the production side, yield is a big driver of cost, and sometimes I need to sell all my units in a fairly short period of time, and simply the opposite, the revenue side is less important than the cost side. What are the best tricks to, I gotta move it now? Tell me about that world.
Well, first of all, the most important thing to understand and what I'm talking about is not substituting one thing for another. I mean, during the cherry season, you got to pound them through there. And you got to pound them through there any way you can. There are probably ways of processing cherries. I don't know. But let's be honest, when this stuff comes in, you've got to sell it. And you're going to use the tried and true methods that have pushed the volume through. I'm talking about kind of incrementing that behavior with high margin stuff. Because when you get a lot of it, you move a lot of product, but you don't make necessarily a lot of money on each unit. But this is kind of the reverse thinking. You're not going to push as much through, but you're going to make a lot more margin on the product. So you're going to have a balance.
Take my hump out, I got contracts, I don't get in that situation.
Some cases, that's true. Exactly right. Yep.
Other questions? How about this side of the room?
They were asleep. I saw they weren't even paying attention over here.
Concluding questions? Well, with that, let's give Dr. Stanton another round of applause. Thanks
Thank
so
you very
much.
much. Thank you.